Reddit, what are some of your completely irrational fears that actually came true? Being watched through my windows at night. It was a panic attack-inducing paranoia for years. About a month or so ago, it happened. I was sitting at my computer when I noticed movement outside my window through a crack in my curtains, which I always keep an eye on. I froze, waiting to see if the guy moved, which is what made me realize it was real, and when he did shift, I turned my head and looked him dead in the eyes, then he ran. It wasn't anyone I knew, he was a total stranger, but I will never forget his face. After finishing a shower, I got out and started putting on my clothes. I look in the mirror as I am doing so and see a face in the reflection in the small window behind me. We made eye contact in the mirror and his eyes got really wide like, oh shit, and he took off. I, too, will never forget his face. EFF everything about windows at night. So, at my boarding school you had to do kitchen work sometimes. I have a fear of sticking my hands in the water when it's too cloudy. I was always called irrational. Skip to last day I had duty before I graduated, murky water and my job was to clear the drain. I refused and got shit. I said there had to be a knife there. Cook was fed up with me, quickly reaches in, and swears as his hand is cut bad. There were two knives, both pointing up, for some reason. I took this as validation to hate doing dishes to this day. TLDR said there was knife. From as early as I remember I was afraid my mom would die in a car accident. Every time she was late coming home or picking me up I would start crying thinking she had got in a car crash. The summer before 7th grade she was late coming home from a summer youth mission with her church. I had just got back from camp and didn't realize how late she was. Next thing I know the pastor is there telling us one of the church vehicles crashed and she was gone. Worst day of my life. Back when I was a youngin', like 7 to 8, I would always watch the toilet flush after I used the bathroom, just to make sure everything went down and nothing came up. For some odd reason, I just had to watch it to make sure everything went according to plan, for fear that it wouldn't or whatever. Well, at the time, I was also afraid of most small animals, bugs, rats, all that weird creepy stuff. Anywho, one night I take a piss and as I'm watching it go down I see something big and black come up from the drain. Something was fucking coming out of the toilet. I screamed at the top of my lungs and dashed out of there. I had my mom's boyfriend at the time go check it out. Turns out it was a rat. He called his dad over, who brought a bunch of garden tools and shit to take the motherfucker out. Don't ask, it was a rural area, and eventually they let it out into the wilderness. Still one of the most random ass things to ever happen to me. I had a serious phobia of driving on the highway. I hate being around other cars at high speeds. I would go on the highway but avoid it at all costs, although I had started to get a little better about it. A few months ago I decided to suck it up and visit some friends across the state, about 4 hours away. The entire trip went really well and I was relaxed while driving on the highway for the first time. About 20 minutes away from my destination some guy tried to merge into my lane without looking and sideswiped me. My car lost control and swerved into the other side of the highway, into oncoming traffic. Then an 18-wheeler took out the back half of my car. My phobia has since been back full force. I always get this fear a boy will just change his mind and stop talking to me once we're involved. The root of this anxiety is from an asshole I dated once. After seeing a new boy for about a month and getting along perfectly well, giving me no reason to worry whatsoever, he just suddenly stopped talking to me out of the blue. Damn it. Tornadoes. I have nightmares about them at least once a week. When it's going to be potential tornado weather, I just stay home. I mean even a 10% chance. All my life my parents have thrown statistics at me about how little of a chance I have from being injured by a tornado. Sure enough, while on the fourth floor of a glass building the sirens go off and a tornado forms outside the window. I was in my college math class, the teacher looks up, and simply says, "Go." I wasn't injured, but I just narrowly made it to the basement of my school library in the midst of complete chaos. Flying trees, screams, the works. Also I called my mom while running to the library and my phone died mid-conversation. You can imagine how that went when all she could hear was screams and tornado, then click. For the next 4 hours I was stuck in a school basement with a dead phone. 42 voicemails. Choking while eating alone. No one was home one day while I was eating a peanut butter and jam sandwich and I choked while I was reading the paper. No fun. After I finally got the food out, I was still slightly panicked and I hurried to sip some Powerade and aspirated it. Took me 30 minutes to calm down and breathe normal again. I've always had an irrational fear of both underground parking garages, I've watched too many slasher movies, and homeless people. I was raised in the suburbs. Anyways, when I went to university I moved into an apartment in the city and I didn't have a car, so I thought I wouldn't have to go in the parking garage. However, the night after I moved in I discovered that the garbage disposal was in the parking garage. The next night I reluctantly ventured down the stairs into the underground parking garage, but I didn't know where the garbage disposal was, so I just started opening random doors. I eventually came to a rusted door in the very back of the parking garage, and when I opened it I found a homeless guy lying in a sleeping bag. I let out a shriek, and then he screamed and threw a beer bottle at me. I took off running and didn't stop until I was back in my apartment huddled under my bedsheets frantically trying to reach the strata manager. Alright, so for some reason I am terrified of iguanas. Like I know they are slow-moving, non-violent creatures I could easily outrun and/or overpower, but I can't think around them. I stop breathing, I can't move. So I go on this kayaking trip in Puerto Rico run by 12-year-old kids, who tell us to watch out for the iguanas and wildlife. We're traveling through the mangroves, it's dark, and iguanas start literally falling out of the trees into the water. I start hyperventilating and yelling at my kayak partner, and a motherfucking iguana falls into the boat in front of us. Almost flips the boat into who knows what's beneath the water. Worst boat trip ever. I've always hated spiders and insects in general, and for a good while after my brother as a kid put a bunch of beetles in my bed right before I got in it as a prank, I was terrified of there being bugs in my bed. Well, as I grew up I sort of abandoned that fear, until one night about a year ago I completely randomly decided to lift my covers after I had already crawled in bed and checked for bugs, truly not expecting anything. Right as I lifted them, lo and behold a spider starts dashing towards me. I flipped shit and started screaming and desperately clawed my way out of my bed and went and slept in the guest bedroom. To this day I will frequently check under my covers before going to bed. Also, 2 weeks ago I randomly checked the inside of my shoe for the first time in my life and there was a good-sized beetle inside, and since I'm relatively certain I would have noticed any other time if there was a bug in my shoe, like after taking them off, I'm convinced it had to be purely and ridiculously coincidental. At least that's what I tell myself. I used to have an irrational fear of tornadoes. It was really bad. Almost every night from when I was 5 to when I was just about 10 I would ask my mom to reassure me that a tornado could not happen where we live, in Pennsylvania. Just as I was starting to get over this fear my family moved to Ohio just outside Tornado Alley, still lots of twisters though. The worst part is the day before we moved in a tornado fucked a barn in half in the town next to ours. I couldn't sleep for days and for the next year and a half I begged to sleep in the basement. I used to have an irrational fear of something biting my feet when I swam in the ocean, and my dad, who grew up on the coast, would always tell me it was NBD and just don't think about it. Well, one family vacation, as I dog paddled around in the waves, some goddamn sea creature, possibly a crab, pinched/bit my big toe so hard it bled. Also, the next day I got stung by a jellyfish in literally shin-deep water. Fuck you, ocean. I don't like sleeping with the closet door open for obvious reasons: darkness, monsters, boogeymen, etc., and I usually make it a case to close it as I'm climbing into bed. One night my dumb dog decides to crawl in there and fall asleep. In the middle of the night, he bursts open from the closet and I start to have a fucking heart attack thinking about what dimensional being just warped into my closet. I've been arachnophobic since 6th grade after a few traumatizing events with spiders. And suffering from minor OCD-style habits caused me to check under the covers of my bed exactly 16 times every night for spiders. Exactly 16, no more and no less. My mother was highly concerned by my irrational behavior regarding spiders. One night I lost count right as I hit 16. I was almost positive I had checked the 16th time, but I did just one more time to be sure. Sure enough, a spider came crawling out. Cue me freaking out, crying, hyperventilating, screaming, waking up my parents, and general chaos. I've always feared boats. Not the water, I love the water, but boats just feel off to me. So cut to me, 13, in a boat in the bay, Presque Isle, for reference. Everything was going fine until suddenly we see dark clouds off on the horizon. We decide to head back to our marina, but just our luck, we run out of fuel halfway there, fuel gauge was off. So now we are stuck in the water, nobody would pick us up, storm is too close, said the towing company, and this absolutely black wall of clouds is coming toward us. We drop anchor and hope for the best. The storm is the worst one my area has seen in decades, 5-foot waves in a 25-foot deep bay. Driving rain, no visibility, the whole 9 yards. When the storm ends 20 minutes later, we are less than 200 feet from a rocky industrial dockyard. The towing company had called the Coast Guard, and we were towed to safety. To this day, I don't go on boats unless I know we have enough fuel to get back to a dock. I've always been really scared of ghosts and the paranormal. Growing up, I was scared of my own shadow, and it took me years to get over being such a pussy about everything. Fast forward to now. I embalm dead human bodies for a living. One day, alone in the prep room, I looked around and realized that I was in the room with about 8 other dead people, and I was actually living one of my worst nightmares as a child. Funny thing is, becoming an embalmer became a great dream of mine as an adult. I ride motorcycles. I'm allergic to bees, like pretty damn allergic. Will Smith in Hitch when he had the allergic reaction. That was like me. I've always been afraid that one day I'd get stung by a bee while riding. I always wear full gear as well. Well, one day I'm in the twisties and I'm going 70 and I get stung in the sternum. My entire upper body locked up for a few seconds. I drove to the hospital as fast as I could. I nearly crashed into the side of the mountain multiple times, and I was going 100 to 110 to get to the hospital in the streets. Huge fear of the dark. I just feel like something is watching me or crawling towards me, ugh. Also fear of not being heard. For example, when you are scared and you can't scream, like in a nightmare. So a few years ago I worked at a camp and I was going to the game shed, where we kept most of the equipment. It wasn't very big, just about 8 feet long and 6 feet wide, but jam-packed with cones and hula hoops and the like, so pretty cramped. This shed was located at the edge of the camp and far away from most of the activities. So around 6 I was putting away a cone when the door caught the wind and slammed shut behind me. The latch was on the outside of the door, but connected to a string which fed through a hole on the other side. I pulled and the string snapped. Fuck. For almost 2 hours I stood in that shed screaming and hitting the door as I watched the sun slowly go down through a gap in the door. Darkness. Bugs. Roaches. Rats. And the whole time I could hear people outside, but everyone just thought they were hearing a kid yelling for fun. Finally some 6-year-old let me out and, at that point I was an absolute wreck and bawled all over him and told him he was a hero. Oh, God. It was awful. TLDR, absolute darkness where no one can hear you scream. Terrified of floods and drowning, even though we're landlocked. My family and I go to Costa Rica to see friends and everyone persuades me to go on a ziplining trip. Halfway through we stop to dip our feet in the stream. Standing on a rock in the middle a fair ways from the bank, and there's an actual flash flood. I had to be pulled to safety by a rope made from our climbing harnesses. Never leaving the house. In college years back, I lived in a basement apartment that had a major problem with house centipedes. You should Google that if you're not sure what it is. I slept on a mattress in my bedroom, nice and close to the floor. I was always petrified going to sleep because I would imagine the centipedes crawling on me. One night, in that beautiful, half-sleep, but still kinda conscious stage, I felt something crawl across my face. Could have been a dream, but I woke fully up right away, and in one swift movement grabbed at my face, threw a handful of something onto the bed, and reached over to flip on the light switch. Yup, 2 house centipedes were crawling on my face, then I ripped them off, and saw them in all their leggy glory frittering on my white bed sheets.